Hi, and I hope you enjoy what I have to say. I hope you find it informative. And I'll call this Changing Attitudes, Segment 7. Okay, if you have not been able to see anything I talked about previously, I'll mention some things to let you know a bit about myself. And for those who have visited me before, welcome. Okay. All right. My name is Roger Farrell, and I've written 3 books and lived a long life, so I have lots to tell the people of things I learned. The one book, book that helps people quit smoking, is Stop Smoking, and then the capital letter N, Stay Stopped. Stop Smoking, N, Stay Stopped. It's on Amazon. It gives a method for people to quit smoking that really, really works. And it also does it so that the stop smoking part lasts forever. There are other methods, and I used one that I did cold turkey because they changed rules where I worked as a 20-year-old or so, approximately. And they wouldn't allow us to smoke in the lunchrooms anymore, and I didn't want to be sneaking into the bathroom like others were to have a puff. So I quit. It wasn't easy to put up with the cravings whacking me in the head. Get a smoke, buddy, get a smoke, I want smoke. And then about 3 years later, I'm at a stag where everybody's smoking, so I get a smoke 1 cigarette, and then an hour or 2 later another one, and another 2 hours later another cigarette, and the next day I'm back to smoking. But my book stops that from ever happening. There's 2 discoveries in it. One is the other thing that a smoker gets a problem with is when they've thrown that so-called last cigarette away. In 20-30 minutes, cravings come. Give me smoke, mister, give me a smoke, give me a smoke. And we have to. We can't put up with its urges are annoying. So to stop the urge, we smoke. Back on it. But I have a discovery that kills those cravings. So it nullifies them. So that discovery and the other discovery that allows you to never smoke again are very, very important and have been successful. Also in the book, Stop Smoking and Stay Stopped, by the way, is on Amazon if I didn't say so, is methods for alcohol drinkers and drug users. They can use a similar or the same steps for stop smoking, but there's a different affirmation to repeat. Affirmation is something like a mantra where you have to say it over and over and over again, like prayer beads. You gotta say the affirmation for at least 30 times, and then an hour or 2 later another 30 times, and an hour or 2 later another 30 times. You do it 5 times a day or 6. But the affirmation finally gets into the subconscious, and suddenly you wake up one morning and there's no urge to smoke. In fact, you don't even think about a cigarette. Like me, it was after lunch when I realized the day that I didn't want to even think about a cigarette. So that works. Now the other 2 books or same title, Witness to Health Changing Attitudes. They're not going to be this large. This is draft copy, so I could see what mistakes I may have to correct. Okay, Witness to Health Changing Attitudes, Volume 1 and Volume 2. They contain stories of people that have symptoms, ailments. I tell them what they need to do in their thinking. They do what I say, and the ailments disappear. Time after time, and I've been doing this since I was 21. And I've never given much thought until recently. People said, well, you should let people know about what you do and how you manage to get people to change their health patterns. Now, I'm going to give you one story, and if I have time, a second story. The story I'm going to give you with now has to do with cancer, but it has to do here with throat cancer. See, back in time, I married my teenage girlfriend. We had 4 wonderful children, girl, boy, and our marriage lasted 25 years. But me being a workaholic, working hours after hours, my previous wife got tired of waiting up for me at nights and so we separated, and eventually we divorced, but we did it mutually. We had no arguments going. In fact, we remained friends for the rest of our lives. So good friends. I mean, her relatives who are up in Sudbury area, French Canadians, can still to this day consider me a relative of theirs. So life can go on. But anyway, I'm mentioning this to let you know that at this time of my story I'm going to tell you, I was single. And I met a woman whose name is, for the purpose of the story, Sheila. Okay, so we go out on our first date. Oh, by the way, Sheila works as a waitress in one of the stores that is at the first floor level of my building I own. It's a 3-story building, and my offices contain the upper 2 floors. So there's about 5 stores on the first floor, one of which is a fine dining restaurant, and that's where Sheila works. Well, we went on our first date, a nice dinner, and when I took her back home, she offered me to have a nightcap coffee. So we go up to her apartment, which is near Yonge and Eglinton in Toronto. And when she pours the coffee, before I get to that, I want to mention, because it was cool outside, so Sheila was wearing a long coat. So when we got into her apartment, I lifted it up off her shoulders, and she pulled her sleeves out, and I put it on a rack, a hook. And then I asked Sheila, I said, what responsibilities are you carrying that you don't want to carry? And she says, I have an aunt that lives out at the east end of Toronto, and every other day I go during my lunch hours and supper hours, and in the afternoon I go there to make her some meals. I said, are you the only relative? She said, no, there's others, but none of them like her. In fact, I don't like her either, but somebody has to take care of her. I thought, well, that's very nice of her. So anyway, back to coffee. When she pours coffee in the cups, they are squat cups, not the usual tall cup. And they're gray because they're made from clay. So they're gray, wide, and around the rim of the lip of the cup are a buildup of clay and colored yellow, red, orange, all around the rim of the cup. So I say, geez, that's an interesting design. And she says, that picture up above you, that was also made by my friend. Both of these items were made by Frida. So I look at the picture and I notice again it's gray, uncolored, except around the rim again of the picture and around the throat, and clay was running down, like running down wet clay. And all that part is colored yellow, red, and orange. Now, the Frida comes up as her name because to pick up Sheila to take her to dinner this night, I had to pick her up at the Mount Sinai Hospital. And I thought Sheila had a problem. She said, no, I'm visiting Frida, who's in there for a few tests. So that took place before we went out. So now I'm looking at this picture, and to me I get a vision of a volcano erupting within that picture and oozing out and down the front of it, down the throat. So I say to Frida, or to Sheila, your friend isn't in the hospital for a simple test, is she? Sheila says no. I said, does she have cancer? She said yes. I said, is it in her throat? She said yes. I thought, your friend really has to let her emotions out. She's holding in her emotions. She has to speak them, get them out. And if she does, the throat cancer will go away. And I said, you can tell her this, can't you? Tell her to speak out her emotions. She looks at me and she says, when I went to see Frida this afternoon, her mother and her brother was there. I said, well, that's not uncommon. She says, but in the 4 years we've been the best of friends, she never once mentioned a mother or a brother. I said, well, Frida must have certain feelings that are not too positive regarding her family. I said, but the fact is that if she doesn't express herself, she won't survive. Now, I thought of getting more information and maybe going and seeing Frida, but this is my first date with Sheila. And I don't want to start plowing into her friends and family or relatives or anything like that. So I just say to myself, forget it. And a few weeks later, she did die. Sad. So I don't feel good about not having gone and seen her. This next discussion I have with Sheila took place a few months after I first met her, so we became steady dates. And we had gone to my eldest daughter's house and my son-in-law's just west of Toronto, and spent the Saturday afternoon there. And on the way back, Sheila asked me, let's go to the Winchester Arms bar across the street from her apartment. And I agreed. She said, I wanted to ask you some questions because your daughter said some interesting things. So we ordered our beer and sat in the booth near the back of the room. Sheila says, you brought your children up very well, and with information that I've heard you give some other people about health and how to make the mind do what it should and not what it shouldn't do. I said, yeah. She said, you also said that, or she also said, I told them that Terry Fox, which is a Canadian hero, because he had a leg amputated living in Nova Scotia, our province on the far east of Canada. And he underwent when his cancer was gone, but outfitted with a false leg, he started what he wanted to do was a walk across Canada, a run if possible. And he wanted to do it for a reason that was really important. He wanted to do it to prove to himself he wasn't a handicapped person. He could do what anybody else could do. And that's why he set out that day, some period ago, when he did start his run. And Sheila says, your daughter said that you predicted that he would die. Why did you say that? I said, well, when I said that, that was back when he had no cancer. And me being a TV repairman, watching television from time to time in customers' homes to correct their problem, I would catch glimpses of the news, and in the news would be Terry Fox, and somebody would be asking him questions, and usually was, why are you doing this, Terry? And he says, well, I just want to prove to myself that I'm not handicapped. Now, when he got to Quebec or Ontario, a woman reporter, asked him the same question that they kept on asking. And she said, why are you doing this? Well, to prove to myself that I'm not handicapped. And she said, in other words, you're out to prove cancer can be beaten. Now, when I heard this I had just come home after my day's work, and my wife and children were sitting in the family room watching the news on television. And this reporter came on, or the screening of her came on, and she asked that question. So you're out to prove cancer can be beaten. Terry thought about it, and he didn't say, no, I'm trying to prove to myself I'm not handicapped. Instead, he said, after thinking for some seconds, yes, I'm out to prove cancer can be beaten. As soon as he said that, I told Sheila, I told my family, he's going to die. Now, I'm not a morbid guy, and I'm not trying to say I'm a predictor either, but people, what they say, often cause them problems, health problems. That's why if you want to be a success, you gotta watch what you say. When you want to be healthy, you gotta watch what you say. And if words are coming out of your mouth or running around in your head that are negative and not positive, you can have problems. And that's why I seen. Sheila says, well, why did what he say matter? I said, Sheila, to me, I got the vision of him standing on a hill and at a war, and the enemy tanks are just rolling down the hill towards him. And he's going to try to stand there against them, which won't work. And that's how big cancer is when it comes to a person that has cancer. Cancer is big. It can't be beaten. I mean, imagine you're walking across the street with a green light, and as you pass the last car that's sitting there waiting for you to pass and waiting for the light to change, that car starts rolling forward and it's coming up against you. Would you put your hand on the hood of the car and push it back, stop it, or would you jump out of the way? She said, well, I wouldn't push it back, I'd jump out of the way. Well, this is what Terry Fox didn't do. He didn't step out of the way. The car was coming at him. The car of cancer was coming his way. And he thought he could push it away. He thought he could get rid of it. I mean, he was already a hero doing his run. But when he made up his mind that cancer can be beaten, which is not possible, his body started changing again and accepted another cancer, which ultimately killed him. We need to look at what we are saying, what words come out of our mouth, jokingly, seriously, sadly. We've got to watch because our body is always listening, or our cells in our body are always listening. They want to help. And if we're cheerful and we sing to them and cheer them on, saying, thank you, body, for being so healthy, that's good. But if we don't, we can have a problem. I have a bit of an example here. For years, people would ask me, Roger, why don't you ever get sick? And I tell them, I'm just too busy to get sick. I thought that was pretty positive. And then I got one day thinking, what if I'm not busy? What if I don't have any busyness? Will that then allow me to become sick? So I had to change my saying. When somebody says, why aren't you getting sick? I just don't get sick, is all I can answer. And what I answer. I remove the part of saying I'm too busy to get sick, because the day can come where I'm not busy. So is my sickness going to come and attack me? So I had to change it. You, listening or viewing, can go through and take a bit of check on yourself as to what comes out of your mouth, what comes out of your thinking that might be leading you to a problem. Because I'll tell you this, ailments, other than a few, are invited to come into our body. Our mind is what invites them. And some of the stories I've told and will tell demonstrate this. Okay, so I'm sorry if I'm a little morbid in this story, but I'm trying to say how the mind thinks is what's going to affect the body. And we're thinkers. And when we think, we don't think of that entering into this great mind of ours, which is connected to everything, our higher self and so on. We just think, oh, I'm just saying it, it's just a comment. But we do have to be careful. Okay, so I'll say goodbye. All the best.